here, and today is a book Tuesday. The book is Bringing Up Bebe. One American mother discovers the wisdom of French parenting, and when it got published about 3 years ago, quickly became a hit. It's easy to understand why. The author writes in a very funny, very entertaining way. Once you start reading this book, you don't really want to let it go. And Pamela Druckerman is an American journalist. She currently works for the International New York Times in Paris. And she moved to Paris to get married to her British husband, and that's where she brought up her 3 children. So the story goes, she was on a holiday with her first child that at that time was about 18 months old. And what she thought would be a very relaxing holiday, it turned out to be a small nightmare. Her toddler in the restaurants would throw her food on the floor, would demand attention from her parents all the time. Pamela looked around and she couldn't see any other French child doing that. French babies and toddlers seems to be very happy sitting in their chairs, waiting for their food. So she couldn't understand how come her child is the only one acting in these ways. She started observing other things as well. For example, French children not only eat their vegetables, but they like them too. They are patient on the top of it, and they are very polite. Is there something, she thought, that French parents know that we don't know? What is the secret behind the good sleepers, the gourmet eaters, and the so relaxed parents? So she went on a mission to find this out, and that's how her book was born. French parents believe it's their job to teach their children to sleep well, to be patient, and to enjoy food. Let's start with sleeping. It turned out that in France, 2-3 months old babies sleep through the night, and certainly by the time they're 6 months old. Pamela couldn't believe that because her daughter wouldn't sleep through the night until much later. I can't believe that because Mika is 27 months and he just starts sleeping through the night. So she was wondering, what's the secret behind? Finally, she found the famous French pediatrician Michael Cohen, who works in New York City, who gave her the secret. And the secret is in la pause. So according to this doctor, French parents need to introduce the pause. They should not pick up the baby every time when the baby cries or weep. The idea is that little babies have a very fragile sleeping cycle. They need to learn how to connect the different sleeping cycles. And the role of the mother is to observe the baby. A mother who jumps immediately and picks up her baby is not strictly observing. She needs to do this little pause so she can learn what sort of patterns her baby would follow. Of course, this doesn't mean that you should leave your baby to cry it out. In the same way, the French parents believe it's their responsibility to teach their children to be patient by introducing waiting. For French, patience is a life core skill. They don't think that they can damage their children by frustrating them. On the contrary, they think that their children will be damaged if they cannot control themselves. And Pamela says that in America she can more often see how children expect to get everything they want immediately, where in France they believe that children should actually cope and live with a bit of frustration. How do they do that? How do they teach them? By keeping them waiting. For example, children need to wait until the meal time comes. They cannot just open their refrigerator and grab food whenever they want. They also introduce them to baking very early in life, probably at about 2.5-3 years old, and the child needs to cope with waiting for the cake to be baked, for mixing all the ingredients. They also say no because it's a chance to show their children that other people in the world have their needs as well, and these needs are as important as their child's needs. In the same way, French parents believe that they need to teach their children to enjoy food. Pamela couldn't believe her eyes when she went to the creche. Creche is the equivalent of the nurseries in the UK and US, and she saw how they serve food to the 18-month-old toddlers. She would say they would have full 4-course meal with starter, with main course, with dessert, with cheese. And it's not only about the food that is served like they're in a restaurant, but it's also the experience. So the ladies in the nursery, they would open each meal. They would describe the meal to the children. They would tell them what it's being cooked with. Children are expected to join the family meals, and they're not expected to eat everything, but they're expected to at least taste it. In France, the meal times are very strictly regulated. Everyone would have breakfast at about 8 o'clock, lunch at about 12, one snack only at about 4:30, and then dinner at 8. There is no problem for children to wait until everybody is at home or the dinner is ready. Maybe that's the secret behind the lower level of obesity in France. They're far behind everybody else in relation to childhood obesity, in relation to adult obesity as well. French are between the slimmest nation in Europe, followed by Italians and Swiss. Pamela talks a lot in her book about other differences between French parenting and American parenting. For example, in France, they really believe that the parental time for the couple is important. They would say this is not a privilege, it's a basic human need. Of course, when a baby comes, the family dynamic changes a lot, but it's not long until the parents need to find their equilibrium. So they have to take time for themselves. They should not be focused on the child only. In fact, they think it's not healthy for the child, everyone to be focused on their needs all the time. They think the children are rational human beings that understand everything. So if you explain to them life, if you explain to them that you have your own needs, they would understand. And it's good for them to know that, because of course nobody in life is going to always satisfy their needs immediately. A big part of the French philosophy on parenting is around the so-called cadre, which means the frame. This idea about the frame comes from Françoise Dautot, who is a French psychoanalyst, the equivalent of Dr. Benjamin Spock in Europe. And the idea behind the frame is that children would have really strict boundaries, but almost everything outside of these boundaries is allowed for them to do. So French are very strict about certain rules. These rules can be how much TV to watch, how to address other people, politeness, how often should you eat during the day. But outside of this, kids are free to do whatever they want, and they're much more independent. I'm not a fan of everything that Pamela says in this book, but certainly there are things that I would consider as a parent, taking more time for myself without feeling guilty, making sure that we as a couple have our own time together are some of the things that I'll implement in my life. And what I like about the book is that Pamela supports all her stories with research. She's a skeptical by nature, as I am, so she doesn't really believe that what they say is the truth just because they say it. And I really appreciate her effort into that. So that's it, sweet moms and dads. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please give me a thumb up and subscribe for my channel. And I would love to hear from you. What is your parenting philosophy? How often you say no versus you say yes to your children? I hope you will leave me a comment below, and see you next Tuesday.